Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. So as Zaharia said, my name is Agnieszka. I'm based at the University of Zurich in Switzerland at the Department of Social Anthropology and Cultural Studies. I had a team project there called Road Work, an Anthropology of Infrastructure at China's Inner Asian Borders. It's a 4-year team project in which the members of the team look at the forms that Chinese investment in infrastructure takes throughout Central and Inner Asia. So some of our collaborators work one of our collaborators work in Inner Mongolia, that is in China, Tibetan areas in China as well. Me personally, I used to work in Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region, the region that Rune already mentioned. Then further collaborators look into Chinese infrastructure investment and construction in Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan, Pakistan, Tajikistan, and Nepal. So it's a team of people, human geographers and social anthropologists, looking into what the Chinese investment in infrastructure is actually doing and how the roads and other transport infrastructures are actually coming into being and what these infrastructures are doing. In my talk today, I will focus on the research that I conducted in Xinjiang. I have been there for the last time in 2016, probably like you. This last research trip was so traumatizing that I haven't been there since. I haven't tried if I still can go, probably I can, but it won't really bring much because most of my collaborators have been disappeared over the past year, so I have no way of contacting anyone that I have been working with. I won't talk more about it because you have mentioned it quite extensively in your talk, but the situation is tragic on many levels. So the material that I'm going to refer today comes from the time when research was still possible. Cool. So since 2013, when Xi Jinping announced the launch of the Belt and Road Initiative, the connectivity that this infrastructural initiative promises has attracted a huge international attention. This promise of connectivity and the nearly magical powers ascribed to infrastructure to generate peace and prosperity and then unite nations and people along this kind of China-conceived New Silk Road are at the very core of the Chinese discourse around the Belt and Road Initiative. Maps of the Silk Road Economic Belt, which is the land component of the Belt and Road Initiative, depict the prospective roads as continuous lines through the Eurasian continent, as if these roads and connections might be unaffected by security concerns, challenging topography, and inevitable material decay. In contrast to those maps, which focus on the geometrical linearity of roads, I, in my research, conceptualize roads as bundles of social relations between, among others, humans who build them and use them, materials out of which they are built, capital which is necessary to build them, terrain in which they are embedded, climate which affects them, and the state which decides which roads are built, where the money is going, and who is building them. The shift of the perspective from representations of roads as lines to social relations draws attention to this kind of inherent liveliness of infrastructure, as it is forged from dynamic entanglements between both human and non-human agentive forces. In the fluid, sandy terrain of the Chinese Central Asia, which is the Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region, unmaintained roads disintegrate in a shorter time than that needed for their construction, similarly to neighboring regions of Pakistan, Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, partially also Kazakhstan. By focusing on the simultaneous competition and interdependence between state territoriality, China's plans of infrastructural expansion into Eurasia, agricultural production, and these desert ecosystems in Xinjiang. Wow, you don't see it, but it's raining powerfully outside. By focusing on these four things, I show the ways in which smoothness of roads, this kind of smoothness of lines, crumbles upon leaving the realm of cartographic representation. My research focuses on southern Xinjiang. That's the region that you basically see here. In the vision of the Silk Road economic belt, should it really materialize, southern Xinjiang and northern Xinjiang too will be this crucial junction on western land and sea routes connecting China with Central Asia, South Asia, the Middle East, and Europe. Xinjiang has been in the focus of a railway and a road construction boom for the past good 15 years or more. However, in my talk today and also in my research, I do not focus on construction, which is a challenge, of course, in itself in this kind of difficult terrain and in this situation of political volatility. Rather, what I focus on and what I want to explore is what happens after the construction is completed, when the roads assume their very mundane life. This focus on the mundane life of roads, yes, shows nicely that it takes much more than to build a road, or more than a building of a road, for the people to actually be able to travel. So first, obviously, it's class, gender, ethnicity. In China, it's also household registration, and many other things that affect whether people can travel or not, where they can go, how far they can go, at what time of the day, at times of the day they can travel, and so on. Second, focusing on the mundane life of roads reveals the complexity of social relationships which have to be orchestrated for any road or any infrastructure feed to last. So to last as a social material object. And because infrastructures are built out of materials which erode and which are embedded in a dynamic terrain and climate, infrastructures inevitably decay. This decay and ruination significantly limit their nominal capacity to connect. In southern Xinjiang, roads are regularly blocked by shifting sand, are hardly passable in dust weather or in sandstorms, and are also regularly destroyed or blocked by seasonal floods and landslides. So in my talk today, I would like to reflect on this social material complexity of roads and the ecosystems in which they are embedded, and then reflect on what implications these have for China's plans of infrastructural expansion in this region of Asia. In my research, I focus on this one section of the National Highway 218 between the city of Korla and the town of Jiarklik, or Ruoqiang in Chinese. It's 450 kilometers. The road runs, as you see, between two deserts, the Taklamakan Desert to the west and the Kuroktak Desert to the east. And the road itself, as well as the Tarim River, along which it was built, they are crucial in preventing the two deserts from merging. They draw the boundary between the two deserts and prevent them from merging. Until the early 2000s, this road was not paved. It was a sand, kind of stone track. In the early 2000s, it was finally paved. There where the road was particularly exposed to shifting sands, some grids were installed to stop the sand from encroaching onto the road. The importance of this road increased further in 2012 when a connecting road to eastern China was built. So we zoomed out. This is the region of Xinjiang where we have been before. I'm too short to show you. This was the road that we saw before, and I'm meaning now this connection has been paved or asphalted in 2013, and through this, southern Xinjiang received a direct connection with with central China, with the national highway and railway network as well. So Southern Xinjiang is now very conveniently and directly connected with central China, from which a lot of traffic is coming into Xinjiang now. Then in 2013, with the launch of the Silk Belt and Road Initiative, the importance of this desert road increased further. Although it doesn't show in its unspectacular materiality, the road is now part of a major road link for heavy goods vehicles commuting between inner China, Xinjiang, Pakistan, Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, and partly also Kazakhstan. The number of those heavy goods vehicles increased from 200 a day in 2012 to 2,000 to 3,000 a day in 2013. So the increase has been massive. Following the road, changes are happening also on the roadside. So the settlements of the paramilitary construction and production and construction corps, which are located in the desert, they have been also refurbished. They look very beautifully now from the road. They have expanded as well. And also roadside catering industry expanded. So you have not a lot, but you have, compared to earlier, you have quite a selection of roadside restaurants and simple guest houses to sleep for the truck drivers and for the drivers of the buses and guests, and travelers. So when a traveler who doesn't know much about the region passes through that area, it all looks like a successful example of connectivity being finally established by overcoming the resistance of the environment. In particular, the desert sand and the wind that keeps moving it. However, this connectivity is extremely fragile and can only be sustained by way of a dramatic intervention in the region's ecosystem and also through a huge investment in road maintenance. So the area which the road crosses is extremely arid, as you can imagine. However, in the past, there used to be extensive poplar and tamarisk forests growing along the Tarim River. So along this whole area, you had extensive forests, and the road itself was built in this kind of green passage established by the forests. The trees and the tamarisk, so bushes, they formed this kind of natural shelter belt which protected the road, the people, and also the goods that were traveling along it. And these are the trees. This is an endemic Euphrates poplar that grows in Central Asia. However, irrigated cotton agriculture in the upper reaches of the Tarim River. So the Tarim River is the longest inland river in China. It kind of starts out here, where the confluence of a few smaller rivers is, and then it makes this kind of bow around the Taklamakan Desert. So it used to be, I think, 1,300 kilometers long or 1,200 kilometers long, and now it's about 800 kilometers of it are left. So since the 1950s, because of an extensive cotton agriculture in the upper reaches, which is around Aksu and Aral here, water, and also because of the growing population in the upper reaches, mostly due to immigration from eastern China, the consumption of water increased massively since the 1950s. And so this, around the 1970s, in the early 1970s, led to a desiccation of the last 300 kilometers of Tarim, which is basically this bit, causing a dying out of those forests that used to grow there. This, in turn, of course, intensified wind erosion, led to an increase in the number of dust days and sunstorms, and increased salinity of groundwater. These developments affected negatively the road. As one of the road maintenance workers who worked on this road in the 1990s said that the workers felt like the slaves of sand, clearing the road of it every day anew. Degradation of the forest decreased the reliability of the road as sand blocked it now regularly at more than 200 locations. And of course, because of this, it also increased the maintenance costs. Facing the disintegration of the only road in this part of Xinjiang and keen on assuring its infrastructural presence in the region, the central government launched in May 2000 a huge project of the so-called ecological water transfers, which should bring water back to the lower reaches of the Tarim River. And so the idea of the government was to release water from a mountain lake, Bostang in Chinese, Bagraj in Uyghur, directly into lower Tarim through a network of canals. The aim of these water transfer or water releases was to recharge the groundwater up to the level where the trees, where poplars and tamarisks could revitalize, and through this the existence of the road and the settlements could be secured. And indeed, in the year 2000, where the first water releases started, after almost 30 years of giving no signs of life whatsoever, the trees became green again. And so again, one of the one of the maintenance workers described it as a wonder. And that's one of the maintenance workers. The water diversion project, which in the first 12 years of its duration cost nearly $2 billion, revived poplars in the direct vicinity of the river. And these trees are now, in turn, expected to render an ecosystem service of sheltering the state-built road and the specific people and goods that travel along it. In natural sciences, an ecosystem service refers to the functions of an ecosystem that are useful to humans. And in this case at hand, the poplar trees were recognized as a key ecosystem provider. Ecosystem service provider. The trees are being given water and in return are expected to protect the road and ensure the connectivity along it. The cost of this water diversion project revealed that the value of this connection already in the late 1990s, when the water diversion project was launched, was already recognized and that it was huge. The value of the connection and the complexity of interest that intertwine in it increased further after 2013 when Xi Jinping launched the Belt and Road Initiative, in which this road became one of the key connections. However, even at the high capital and ecological costs, as is currently the case, the capacity of the trees to protect the road and thus the capacity of the road to perform as the major link in the Silk Road economic belt remain questionable. At the current level of water transfers, the lake from which the water is being stolen will be empty in 10 years. Already today, as you can imagine, Lake Bagraj is a zone of an acute environmental crisis. When the lake is emptied, the settlements along the road and the road itself will return to this kind of disastrous situation from before 2000. The importance of this road and other roads in southern Xinjiang for Chinese exports to Central Asia and South Asia, and then for resource imports from Central Asia to China, is huge. At the same time, the gap between the discourse of flow and connectivity and the socio-ecological environment in which this road and many others in this world region are embedded is potentially large. In the case of the desert road, the costly attempts to revitalize the poplar forest reveal that the vulnerability of transport infrastructures is recognized by the central Chinese state, as is the human inability to actually sustain them in a longer run. Thus, the state has attempted to restore the river and the trees to the degree necessary to them, for them to be able to protect state territorial markers and the infrastructures of the so-called New Silk Road. The uncertainty of this deal based on draining a lake in order to refill a river raises broader questions of how, and especially how long, can connectivity along this and similar roads in this westward arc of the Silk Road economic belt be sustained, and then which connections and which fissures will come into being afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you.